Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, December 13th. Apparently, it's the Shadowverse World Grand Prix 2021. It's ridiculous how bad they are, frankly, at advertising these things. Kind of how bad they are in general of just having updates actually go through the Steam interface so they're automatically updated compared to their own internal update here, which obviously is something that they do for, I guess, the mobile version of Shadowverse. But that code really does not need to exist on this Steam version. Like every other game, fairly constantly when installed on your computer on Steam, automatically updates in the background when you're not even paying attention to it. And arguably that does potentially create a situation where if you had limited or metered internet, you have to be careful about having Steam installed or having specific games installed with automatic updates. But if you have unlimited internet, it doesn't really affect anything. For the accountability section today, the biggest thing I need to be held accountable to, I'll hold myself accountable to, is the fact that on Friday we did not get any of the games covered. So we have a ton of games to cover today and not really a lot of even news on this Monday, which is not super surprising considering it's Monday and news usually happens on Tuesday. And there is there is a lot of games to cover, frankly. Over the weekend I uploaded some videos, which that's fully automatic, so I should be doing that every weekend. And I played a little bit of the Batman Telltale series, and frankly it's really hard to maintain momentum playing the Batman Telltale series. I've gotten through the first of, I believe, 5 episodes, but it's taken me 3 or 4 days when really I should have done that in one day. The Batman, the year 1 Batman that they are depicting is very much on the scale of the jerk Batman archetype that I really don't like. And in general, I feel like, darn it, last thing I want is a private match. I guess Swordcraft and Bloodcraft is all we're going to focus on for now. Like, they say it's a Grand Prix, but yeah, I guess that is a real world event that they're promoting, because I'm not seeing any arenas games I can play or in any way I can actually be involved in it. Bloodcraft or Swordcraft, I believe, is what we were playing, so let's start with this. But yeah, there's a specific point in the Batman episode 1 Batman Telltale series where they literally have to force you have no choice, and this is a growing problem, particularly playing as such an established character as Bruce Wayne and Batman. They force you to threaten to break an arm of a mercenary that you had already captured, already tied up. You literally had already zip tied, which they don't even have a zip tie animation. You've zip tied several people and their hands just go together, and they didn't bother to animate a actual zip tie around the wrist. But you had already had this mercenary hanging upside down and zip tied his hands together. You cut the zip tie and then start threatening to break his arm. That is just like totally on the far extreme of the jerk Batman, the vigilante that should not in any way be idolized. they're basically doing nothing that would let you play as the Batman, who is the world's greatest detective, who is actually on the side of good, for lack of a better term, who actually can think things through. They're constantly pushing you into extremely brutal, extremely violent actions, which, to be fair, I do think that is kind of in line with how DC in particular has been pushing Batman more and more. The writers are not smart enough to write the world's greatest detective, so they de-emphasize that, and they would rather just have the animator animate an action sequence. At least in the comic books, though, when you're only doing 16 pages a month or so, or maybe 20 pages a month, you tend not to fight low-level bad guys. You tend not to see Batman slamming a low-level mercenary's head into the ground, or they, in previous games, they've had it where you kind of kick as you're swinging and it knocks them in the air, and they don't slam into a wall when you kick them in the air. They tend to just kind of arc and fall down on the ground, and that's a different thing too, certainly. It's a big difference to swing on a batarang, and to swing on a bat rope and slam somebody into a wall that is a foot behind them, compared to kicking somebody and just knocking them down. It's also a big thing to potentially knock somebody over the edge, versus grabbing them, tying their foot, and then throwing them off the edge, which is something that you see in like Arkham City games and Arkham Asylum. Even in Arkham Asylum, though, there is a very high level of smashing people's heads. In Arkham City, there's a high level of smashing low-level thugs' heads into the ground, and just concussing them. Which, yeah, it kind of sucks. Batman as a Telltale series kind of sucks. They did do something interesting that would be a spoiler for the first episode, so I don't want to tell it, but suffice it to say, they created a relationship that I had never seen before, played with, and it'll be interesting to see if that does make any difference in the long run. Because it could make a difference to the story, but it probably won't. They're also depicting the Penguin as a tall, slender character, more in line with the Gotham Fox TV show, I would guess, than anything else. And at the end of the first season, they're talking about it. They're promoting and pushing a DC Rebirth reboot, which must have been after New 52, because I don't even recognize it as one of the reboots. So it probably was either the one right after the New 52 reboot, which was the reboot I tried to read, thinking stupidly that would be the first and only reboot. And then, in all fairness, I feel like New 52 probably was a reboot that had come after a long, consistent run. Like, there really hadn't been DC reboots for quite a while before New 52, and they were definitely lying or intending it, and then didn't follow up on those intentions to make the New 52 stick. But after about a year and a half, they rebooted New 52, and then now DC is pretty much, you get maybe in a year and a half, maybe two, before they reboot it all again. You were done for. So, yeah, it's after trying to read the New 52 and finding that, frankly, I couldn't even care that much about the New 52, that pretty much killed any interest I would ever have with comic books. Which, at a certain level, I had to pick one. I could have picked Marvel.
Why?
But I could have picked Marvel, yeah. But honestly, it wouldn't have probably changed anything. And the reason I picked DC is because the reboot did seem like a good starting off point. It is a Trojan horse concept to get new readers. Whereas Marvel's consistent or semi-consistent stories that only slightly reboots after crises and changing of universes when they like get rid of Spider-Man's marriage and things like that's probably a special exception too. The smarter move, certainly, and this wasn't something I foresaw, was the idea of the Marvel Cinematic Universe being the true reboot to follow, because even though it's a different form factor, it is fairly obvious now that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is telling a better version of Marvel than the comics probably could ever do. And very quickly the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to become the canonical version for the vast majority of people who even begin to pretend like they like Marvel. And DC has really failed to accomplish that same level. DC, frankly, doesn't even know how to advertise itself, because at the end of episode 1, they say read DC Comics Universe, the DC Rebirth series, anywhere and everywhere where comics are sold, which in 2021 is basically nowhere. Like, maybe there's a few comic book shops still around after the pandemic, but not that many. They failed to put a website or like advertise the Comixology or whatever, DC Direct or whatever it is now. There's maybe, if you're in a really big city, you've got a couple used bookstores where you could get old comics, but they probably don't have that much of a selection as far as old comics. And new bookstores are going to barely have a shelf of new comics, and that's about it, if they even have that much. It would make so much sense, even when the Batman Telltale game happened, for them to, if not have a QR code, at least have check out www.dc.com/where-to-buy, which is not even a website I know for a fact exists, but it would be obvious to have that in any product for cross promotion, is that just have this constantly updating URL that they can look up your zip code and say, here's some comic book stores, or here's where you can buy these comics direct, or here at the very least is an affiliate link to Amazon.com. But just telling people anywhere and everywhere books are sold, that is just like the laziest thing ever. And I know there's a certain level in which the Marvel and DC probably have some agreements not to directly advertise anybody or directly sell comics, but there's definitely ways to get around that.
Now you've done it.
And inherently, I think it is the comic book's own fault that they've never learned how to do business, and that's why they failed. They've never learned what was popular amongst their fandom, and they just throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall. I mean, you look back in the 40s and 50s of comics, and it's like We think this comic sold really well because there was monkeys on the cover. Let's put monkeys on the cover. We think these comic books sell because there was a lot of red on the cover. Let's put a lot of red on the cover. They're just like grasping at straws in their ignorance about the real reasons why comics were selling, which was either it was a random fluke, or it was a very good artist, or a very good writer. And if anything, they probably have inbuilt decades of the ideas that the artists and the writers don't matter, so much so that they have this incredibly stupid blind spot of thinking that that the management can somehow affect sales. And we potentially could see some video game companies go in that direction, but I think video game companies aren't ever really going to be allowed to delude themselves that much to think that, yeah, the programmers, the artists, the writers don't matter. Although we do see that sometimes. Like, there's undoubtedly some cases where they just don't really care about the writers or artists who work on video games. In a lot of ways, Telltale themselves are kind of a great example of that, because Telltale was constantly hiring out contractors as writers, and it really never worked. Not even in the first season of The Walking Dead. You had like one or two good season episodes, and then you had 3 episodes that were mediocre. Not bad, but mediocre. It was still good enough to send them down the path of constantly hiring contractors, but it was just bad business decisions to keep going down that route. You should have taken the good writer that was the good 2 or 3 writers even from Telltale Season 1 and put them in a writing room to work together for Season 2 and have them on call to be the writers for every other game. Or you even take one good writer and have them be the lead writer of The Walking Dead. Then you take the second best writer and you have them work on your next project with some of the lesser writers and get them in a writing room. And it doesn't have to actually even literally be a real world writing room. You just have to say, you guys are going to collaborate and work together. It probably would be somewhat helpful if it was all in the same room. But it's not necessary that it actually does that.
Only one stands to ascend to. A fighting night begins.
Do I want to evolve somebody?
That's all belongs to me.
You disappoint me.
I'll protect you with
I
everything I've
will
got.
be back.
Yeah, I feel like the only other thing I could say about Batman Season 1 is that at the very end of the game, there is this point where it takes the idea of planning out your actions as far as you're going to take down a lot of enemies in a room, and let you do something different that I haven't seen in any other Telltale game, where you have kind of pick option A, pick option B as an action. But it's weird that you're preemptively then planning that out, and then also having to press QuickTime events to activate those actions. Like, that's just not something I would, I really appreciated. It would have been nice, certainly, if you could have probably just paused time as you were actually doing the actions, and instead of having to pre-program 4 actions and then press quick time events, it would have been nice if just throughout the entirety of the game you were given several options, an A or a B option, and then you just pressed kind of a quick time event, or not even a quick time event. It just paused the game and said, do you want to do action A or action B, to better integrate that. And that concept of pre-programming and connecting items to pre-program what you're going to do. So it's like, are you going to knock the guy to the left or to the right? Or are you going to smash him in the wall, or are you going to smash him into the table?
Let's go together, all right?
That linking concept also was used earlier in the first episode as a way of investigating. And so more of that would have been great. But then there's also definitely some bad parts where you're in the back cave and you're basically just looking at flat computer screens and you're supposed to be reading that. That's very much against the idea of it's very much against the idea of I don't even know what I was talking about. I lost my stream of thought. Yeah, sitting in the back cave reading things is not fun by any means. Having to play as Bruce Wayne is not fun by any means. This is because I'm playing a comic book related thing, I guess. I got suggested a new YouTuber that covers comic books, and like some of them I like, some of them I don't. Like there's Comic Pop, I think, is probably the best example of what I've really come to enjoy, is somebody just talking about a collection of comic books to tell a full story, full narrative, full arc. And he's explaining it to 2 of his friends who don't really read comic books, although by now, over the years, are fairly well informed about comic books.
You're so adorable.
And I kind of enjoy their improv red letter media style of coverage. I would say, yeah, it's a red letter media style of coverage. I can't evolve this guy though.
Rage empowers me.
Let's go ahead and get rid of this.
Your lucky day, my friend. Cowardly creatures. Time to guide the next lamb.
Anyways, yeah, this isn't even very much video game related though. This new YouTube channel, I don't even know the name of it, covered kind of the fashion and the more recent Supergirl depictions, which, yeah, there are quite a few artists that were doing a lot of cheesecake drawings in actual comics of Supergirl. Most notably, a lot of people probably have seen the one where Superman is standing, flying next to her, and she's basically naked, holding shreds of clothing in front of her. And it got me thinking that Supergirl as a character, and I'm just going to throw this out as a bit of fan fiction since I'm never going to make a comic book and wouldn't care to. Anyways, if I was going to make a comic book or even start to go down that route, I definitely wouldn't make a Marvel or DC comic. I would make something completely independent that I owned and could control for the entirety of its existence until it became public domain. But if I was going to do something with her, I'd probably take her out of the realm of being a superhero in general. And it's a kind of silly thing to say, but if she's like supposed to be a teenager or like college kid, like you would almost assume that she would have been in the history of a Teen Titans. So she would probably be 19, 20, 21. I'd probably have her move to Gotham, as silly as it is, because you'd think she'd be in like the Superman city, but no. I'd move her to Gotham, have her run a like bar slash hangout for younger superheroes, or just people who are super empowered that don't really always want to fight, and tell different stories that way. Sure, you could have her having to throw out drunk patrons or something like that, and it wouldn't be like she's you would have to be careful to not say she's like contributing more to the delinquency of minors, but like if she created a safe place where the younger Robins can come and hang out with without being at risk, either in costume or out of costume, that's one thing. Certainly she could bring in a lot more of those characters. You could have people showing up at the bar and needing help. You could even have her running basically a therapy group session in the back room with a lot of these characters, because inherently the story that's never told, particularly in DC, is like the Robins are never allowed to be a kid, or never shown that they're allowed to be a kid. Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, never really shown to be a kid, and particularly it's the Bat family in which this happens a lot too, but you can easily see other kids Flash, things like that, some of those younger characters wanting a place like that, whereas Supergirl, particular as it seems like she's mostly been drawn, particularly in the older comics, is really just about fashion and shopping and just trying to be a more girls comic, and frankly we have DC has like almost all of their comics are action comics, so getting out of that realm and saying, hey, here's a different depiction of how somebody with superpowers can choose to live their life. And sure, maybe they'll get called in when there is a big earth destroying event, but on the day-to-day case, she doesn't have to be like Batman, who is spending every night prowling for enemies. It would be kind of like the cleanup crew in Marvel. What is that one called? I want to say the Corps, but I don't think that's the actual name of it. There's a cleanup crew group of people that have powers, but they're not particularly great powers, and they're just used to fix and rebuild things that are destroyed by the more powerful superheroes or supervillains. But yeah, you could definitely approach from a more emotional thought. The problem with this idea, though, is that it's a great idea if you can get writers to actually write it. And I'm really just throwing out a general concept. But they have to be not emotionally stunted writers. And I have to say, I think almost all comic book writers are more emotionally stunted than even the worst of the comic book fans.
I'll see you in purgatory.
Like,
March on! I'm ready for more. What do we have?
but yeah, that was a thought I had while I'm sitting around and not really accomplishing much. I'm still sleeping a ridiculous amount as far as to get back to the accountability sections. Like I've got the heater going quite a lot, and whenever my heater kicks in, it's just like, all right, that's nap time. That's the signal for a nap. So I'm really not accomplishing anywhere as much as I should be. But my general just dislike for Batman as he's being treated here is also a factor.
My loyalty is ironclad. One step closer to victory. Harder armor. Steel yourself.
Die, cretin.
I want to generally, before I move on, which I should move on, it's been 30 minutes. I want to generally get done with the Telltale games, and so I think The Expanse is probably a great example of a Telltale game that I have no real desire to play anytime soon. But to be done with the Telltale games, that first of all fixes a mistake that I made by just buying all the Telltale games in the collection and thinking I would just cover all the Telltale games, which I did do, or I've mostly done, but it is not been a efficient use of my time, I think. Really. And I think I could have accomplished more had I played at least one or two JRPGs or just RPGs in general instead of covering a few of the Telltale games. They also really failed to be something that would be easy to make footage of, and I've constantly run into this idea where I'm looking for ways to make quick and easy footage and not have to interact with the game as much, and it doesn't ever really work. Speaking of RPGs, I saw a review for the Senran Kagura X, the ninja crossover, Senran Kagura Neptunia crossover game. I don't actually know the name of it. And seems like it's kind of a very much a mushy middle between both games. It doesn't have destructible clothing, so there's no lewdness there. What is supposed to be their lewd, the lewd,
let's speed things up.
Guess you want to play this here.
Steel yourself. Uncouth.
Yeah, what is supposed to be the lewd minigame is just the balancing game on a peach, and it's not really lewd either. It's like you're really not seeing a lot of skin. It definitely feels like the person who was in charge of the Sin and Kagura games in particular, he's not there anymore, so with him gone, there seems to be more kowtowing to Sony censorship, or Sony censorship is just won out for some other reason, and it's
almost amusing.
kind of a pointless experience now, because if you wanted a RPG game, you probably wouldn't want to play something that's fairly simplistic like this crossover game is. If you wanted to play a Neptunia game, there's better Neptunia games. If you want to play a Sinran Kagura game, there's better Sinran Kagura games. If anything, it might just be a hint that there's a high chance there will never be another good Neptunia or Sinran Kagura game available.
This town is good folk for breakfast.
I shall clear us a path.
It takes so much for that axe.
So, yeah. I will try to cover some of the Neptunia games, since I have a whole bunch of them, but I in a lot of ways, I made the same mistake again by buying a big bundle of Neptunia games. I probably will just try and cover the remakes, the rebirth series of Neptunia, and spotlight some of the older ones. But also, I'm probably not going to try and cover... Let's just break through this real quick. Let's just stop playing ranked and only play unranked going forward. Yep. I probably won't even try to play any of the Neptunia games until I've covered a couple of better games. I think I'm going to go with Ni no Kuni, and then very possibly after that I'm going to try and do Fallout 3.
A pointed sword deserves a pointed response.
Which I feel like I probably will spotlight Fallout 1 and 2 and just see if I actually really want to play Fallout 1 and 2 ever. First. But one of the Fallout games I'd like to cover as a more Western RPG. It's been a while since we covered Skyrim. So I have covered some RPG games and just haven't really been focusing in on them as much as I probably should, considering how many of them are there. Alright. I'm also thinking I will try and directly contact Censored Gaming on Twitter to see if I can give my 2 cents as far as the kind of obvious putting the thumb on the scale that Steam has been doing. It seems fairly obvious that they are doing a form of soft censorship by putting all the adult games on every other Friday, when every other game that comes out gets released at random intervals. The thing Censored Gaming would have to do there certainly is they would have to reach out to these companies and see if they can legally or would be willing to talk about their release date versus the dates they were approved, whether they actually are picking those release dates or whether those release dates are being forced on you. See, I've seen this game before, Pipeline VR, or a similar game, $9.34. It sucks that it requires VR though. I'm gonna put it on the fall list. Like, what's really crazy is it's taken this long for them to really decide. It's to make those kinds of pipe games, because those really should have been like day one of VR.
Happiness
I guess Expedition Rome here has this like Twitch extension that they're talking about that I clicked on. I don't really know what that's all about, but I think we are starting to see more of the ideas of Twitch extensions. And then Beta Squadron from Devolver Digital. I don't know if this is specifically any game or if they just want you to play betas of Devolver Digital games. I guess they just want you to play betas of several of their games. Here we have another Sock Pop Collective, which still looks like these are low effort asset flips, but at the very least he stopped serializing it and having like Sock Pop 7 or 8 happen. The problem here is he's seemingly gotten a little bit better with his asset flips, and honestly Sock Pop Collective was more annoying because they were flooding Steam than they were making terrible asset flip games, although they were doing that also. Still very much sticking with the same sock. Steam achievements selling for $175 a bundle here. Let's see.
Scatter like the blossoms.
I am a
Didn't
prisoner
move
of this
fast
world's
enough.
whims.
So this guy's already ignored, but
I do believe we have a case.
yeah, December 13th versus the last releasing was October 12th, and they were releasing one about a week, which is way too much still. But when you start to get really far back here, I definitely know there was a point where they were releasing several in the same day even. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just staggering it once a week. Arguably, Sock Pop Collective, as a game publisher, shows why even that exclusivity, here we can see them putting the numbers in the thumbnail, like even that option really should not be allowed. For Steam Direct, one game a month, I think it's probably more than enough. Because you definitely run into a case here where it's just like somebody game jamming effectively a game every week and then trying to sell it on Steam. Here we go. January 17th, 2 games that day. Wow, I guess maybe they didn't release a whole bunch in the same day. Maybe it's just that I constantly was seeing Sock Pop Collective every week that caught my attention. But yeah, I still stand by the idea that once a month at maximum for a Steam Direct is fine. Like even AAA publishers, big publishing companies that wouldn't be in a Steam Direct contract, even they would not really put out more than one actual game. And frankly, I doubt they'd even put out more than 2 or 3 DLCs for games in the same month. Meanwhile, you're hurting the integrity of the entire storefront by being greedy. In the same way that Walmart wouldn't allow somebody to buy out entire aisles or entire shelves of just for their products. Even when you have like a toy shelf that is all Lego, that's definitely not Lego saying we want that entire aisle. It's Walmart saying we'll make that entire aisle. And I would, if it were a different situation, then And Steam was saying we'll make an entire section just for sock pop collective games. That would be interesting, but then that would also be weird. And I don't see any reason why Steam would do that for anybody.
That was almost amusing.
Moving on with news, Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Odyssey crossover DLC launches this week, according to Video Games Chronicles. The game Scorn has slipped to late 2022, which definitely would explain why we haven't seen anything from it at the Game Awards or lately. Apparently $70 pricing is coming to PC, starting with Square Enix's next game. I think this is inaccurate because I think I definitely have seen $70 pricing for base games already on Steam. What it comes down to is this slowly going to be the industry standard, or is this just Square Enix trying to be an outlier and establish it as a new standard? At a certain level, I think it would take a lot to shift the spending habits of a lot of Steam gamers, because Steam comes from the idea of Steam sales a lot more than buying on day one. You very rarely see stories of people talking about how they're pre-ordering games before they're released on Steam, or that they're buying games day one on Steam. If they are buying games or pre-ordering games day one, those are the lost generation of gamers that don't care about what the cost price is anyways. But you definitely on a yearly basis do hear stories of, I got this game during a Steam sale and it's very cheap. My own spending habits definitely cycle around that. There's still thousands upon thousands of games on my wish list that are older games that I would only buy when they are discounted, and there's very little desire to buy something brand new. Even as a YouTuber or content creator who very possibly would benefit from playing newer games, which, although I've never actually seen that work in practical use, like I really have no desire to cover that. And the YouTubers that I follow, they're not really playing the newest games either. Even XPlay is like reviewing Shovel Knight, a Shovel Knight game. That's not a brand new game. And I'm a little surprised XPlay even did a Game of the Year awards this year, considering how they've just not even really been in business the full year. It would have been very easy for them to skip that. I think there's a lot of things they're still feeling out and trying to figure out what the new XPlay will be. But yep.
You're done for. Grovel like the maggot you are.
And if you look at Steam, if you look at the Train Simulator game, there has already been a lot of cases of games that even their base game were above $70. So what this really is saying is $70 AAA games are coming to Steam from Square Enix. I feel like a potential long-term effect of this reevaluation of working bad jobs and the anti-work movement is going to be a lot of parents telling their kids, look, I don't have the money for these games. I'm not going to hurt my own mental health. I don't know how you say that to a kid who just wants a toy, but there's going to be general conversations, I think, of we're going to be less consumeristic and because of the anti-work movement, and we're only buying things that are absolutely necessary. Now that may mean that the next generation after such is going to realize it's going to go the other way, and all of a sudden it's going to be like the baby boomers again, who are just incredibly like consumeristic and often narcissistic and selfish. And so we may see a huge amount of spending happening. Hopefully not. Hopefully all of society and every generation learns that there's just been way too much consumerism.
A flurry of drops.
The words escape me.
But
Hear the roar of my nine
people always need entertainment, and Square Enix in particular is kind of an example of a company that's the old guard of entertainment companies and video games that is on the verge of dying out and being replaced, because they have consistently tried to do the old style of JRPGs without really involving. They've tried to do less for more money. They constantly fail and blame their contracting companies. They're just not in line with what a new
This is where I truly shine.
the next generation of game developers would be. Moving on. Remember, we have a lot of news to get to, a lot of games to cover today, and I really need to just rush. In fact, I may just at some point stop playing Shadowverse altogether. Persona 3 Portable could be the next series remaster, which,
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
okay, if it's labeled Persona 3 Portable, I assume
Let's play.
that
Blade is honored. I
that means it was a cell phone game originally, and so a remaster of that. Persona 3 Portable is a port of Persona 3 first released on the PlayStation Portable in 2009. Okay. Which, that seems weird, because I feel like there is a better version of Persona 3 out there. Isn't Persona 3 Golden a better version? So why go back to a previous port? It doesn't make sense. Like, maybe there's slight changes in the story as far as Persona 3 Golden. Like,
You're weak.
really don't have time to be doing research, but I really want to see what this break up. Okay.
You're weak.
Ow!
Let's get rid of the Wikipedia ask for money.
Hear the roar of my nine flames. Hear the roar of my nine flames.
Alright,
And mine alone. My fated
what does this do?
and mine alone. My fated life and mine alone. This ends here.
This is a guest article.
Ignite.
Click here for
Enemy or no.
more
You did
information. What does that mean? Did it say good article or guest article? Good article. Interesting. So apparently they're kind of rating quality of articles now. So Persona 3 originally was a PlayStation 2. Persona 3 Festival Epilogue gives more closure to the original game. Although it was criticized for not featuring the simulation aspect of Persona 3. A PlayStation Portable version of Persona 3 Persona 3 Portable was in 2009, whereas the original game was 2006. Okay. And then it's been re-released up to 2011. The PSP version adds the ability to play as the female protagonist, new story elements of music. Okay. Two fighting games that continue the story of it were released. So it must be that there's just Persona 4 Golden and let's see. Persona sub-series of the Shin Megami Tensei Persona, which the Nier series also is a spin-off or sub-series of another Japanese game, and yeah, that's definitely not going to make me want to actually play all of them. So apparently there's just no hope of the original Persona game or Persona 2, which, looking at this art, this is like not anything I've even ever seen. In fact, the artwork looks completely different for Persona 2. And Persona 3 is actually the 4th entry in the series. Okay. So Persona 4 Golden was the PlayStation Portable game. And yeah, you can definitely see in the artwork of Persona 4 it looks different. And then Persona 5 looks different, so a big shift definitely in that art style. Which arguably I think I was already in the camp of saying if I'm going to play the Persona series, it's going to be Persona 3, I guess, Persona 3 Portable, and Persona 4, and probably nothing else. Like, nothing earlier than that, at least. Maybe check out the fighting games, but even trying to look at the fighting games is kind of outside of my skill set at the moment, since I haven't looked at any other fighting games. Moving on, Halo Infinite is finally getting Slayer playlist next week. Slayer, SWAT, and more will join in Halo Infinite's multiplayer suite. I don't even know what Slayer is, but I have heard people talk about Slayer in Halo, and I imagine it is something you want. If I was to generally guess, it's probably a playlist of maps where one player becomes a hunter, slaying other players. And then you switch around, I would assume, after you've killed them or time has run out, and then the other player, a different player, becomes the hunter. So almost like a tag. One player being it, and then the other player being it. Video Game Chronicles says Star Wars Eclipse could be 3 to 4 years away, it's claimed. Quantic Dreams probably shouldn't say that. Although, in all fairness, assuming that Star Wars Eclipse is like every other Quantic Dream game and they're not trying to do something different, It really wouldn't take 3 or 4 years to make a very linear game with very little gameplay mechanics in it. It is going to be kind of weird to have both a Star Wars and Star Trek game come out some similar times, and neither of them actually having a major focus on gameplay mechanics. Although that may be a good move too for those genres. Fable creator, who really Peter Molyneux at this point does not deserve to be reported on at all. He has long since not been connected to Fable, which I assume Microsoft still owns Fable and is just kind of not doing anything with it. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they're not doing anything with Fable, because they just are trying to hope that Peter Molyneux will disappear, die, or retire, so he doesn't shoot his mouth off again with promises that can't be delivered. Fable series in general has just kind of never been that good. It'd be interesting if they gave the Fable series to either Bethesda or Double Fine. I think Double Fine actually could probably do something decent with the Fable series.
Scatter like the blossom.
Should I drop the... Oops, my hand slipped.
Someone call tech support.
But anyways, his little company, which had made not a lot of games that are good. His best game was a game that was just an infinite hiking simulator. His next game is going to be a blockchain business sim. Legacy coin will be the basis of the game's economy. So it seems to me like this is actual blockchains. Seems to be like Legacy coin. There's some kind of spin-off of Ethereum. I do think, as far as cryptocurrencies go, like, while something like Bitcoin might be very solid, the fact that there are so many scams that scam cryptocurrencies that can be traded into Bitcoin has degraded my personal confidence, and I think just overinflated the actual value of even solid cryptocurrencies, or somewhat solid cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So yeah, it would be the equivalent of being able to take like fake US dollars, forged counterfeit US dollars made out of like North Korea, and trade it in for real world US dollars that overinflates the amount of dollars in circulation to some small amount, and to some small level does hurt the US economy. That's the whole intention at a certain level. But or a better example would be able to take fake forged US $100 bills and then translate it into real euros, and how that would hurt the euro valuation. And arguably there might be more forgery happening in cryptocurrency than there is in the real world. Speaking of economics, I follow slickdeals.net, and I was very surprised that they had a big deal, a like top level deal that they were advertising, which was the US Treasury just selling specific bonds that were supposed to like be inflation proof.
My wings and heart cry die for blood.
I don't know how many people would actually
Your head and body must part ways.
consider buying bonds at the moment, or individual bonds. Most people who buy bonds do it through a 401k. But
The sword's waiting on me.
that is odd. I've never seen that before. I've never seen the closest thing I've seen like that is like deals to get savings accounts, which I don't think savings accounts are particularly paying much, and usually don't pay much anyways.
Though centuries pass, I remember all.
And certainly, I'm not going to talk about economics too much, but there is a consistent debt ceiling and threat of defaulting on the United States that is threatened every session of Congress, because Congress, the last thing that they have as far as power that they have not given up through things like executive actions is the budget. And so whoever's in party, whichever side's in power, is constantly trying to threaten that the US would not pass a budget or default as a way of negotiating. And there have been, I guess, not times when they've actually defaulted, but definitely times when they have furloughed and not paid government employees, which is ridiculous. And at a certain point, the last time there was furloughs, there was straight up people who were not working in any way for the government who were also being told that they were being furloughed, which is just a lie. There's no such thing as being furloughed if you're not a government employee, and frankly, it should be illegal to furlough anybody at all. It's just, on certain levels, it's slavery with the promise of being paid back later. But yeah, that is potentially one of the problems with the way the government, US government budgets, is that they fight over authorizing things.
I go with the wind. I like, give me that.
Moving on back to video games, though, a Pokemon Center's UK online store is quietly opened. You can get exclusive plush, clothing, and more are now available in the UK. I bet they don't ship outside of the United States, outside of the UK, though.
Do not seek what is not there.
I imagine there's some Pokemon fans that would definitely like that, but and I wouldn't be surprised if there are ways to hire somebody to potentially ship something from the UK to other parts of the world. Ubisoft has updated the Splinter Cell trademark ahead of its reported new game, which I suppose that is
Are you ready for true combat, pup?
I don't know why I played
Got
that.
to roam in style.
That was stupid.
I like, give me that.
But yeah, there seems to be some working on a new Splinter Cell game. Doesn't matter, they would have definitely renewed the trademark anyways. Video Games Chronicle says Xbox's 4-hour history documentary is available to watch for free now. This is supposedly a warts and all documentary. It's got like 5 chapters here. Which, as someone who kind of considers them somewhat of a video game historian slash journalist, I probably shouldn't watch this, but I don't know if I really want to spend the time watching something like that. That's the weirdness, certainly, that would come around something like that.
Let's
Is
speed things up. Too
it's
slow.
gonna be long.
I'm heading
Although,
to the gods.
in all fairness, I did spend yesterday several minutes, maybe an hour, maybe even two, watching a historical coverage of Zapper games and Zappers that came out for the NES, so it's not beyond my normal consumption of edutainment. Moving on, Henry Cavill would love to be in a Mass Effect series as long as it's handled well. In a lot of ways, I imagine any actor would love to be in almost anything as long as it's handled well. There is, I guess, a question, certainly, as to whether he means as a voice actor or face model for a video game, or if he means for a Mass Effect TV series or movie series. Henry Cavill, I guess, was also The Witcher, so he does seem to be moving towards the nerd genre of movies. PlayStation has finally announced its own PS5 plates called console covers, which, yeah, they don't look particularly unique or in any way really copyrightable or trademarkable. And this was something that they teased like day one. I'd really have to question if these are just covers for the controllers. How well do these things snap in and snap out? And is there a way to change the button colors? Or are these just custom controllers that you have to buy brand new? Because we know the covers here snap in, snap out, but I never saw anything that I recall as far as controllers being able to be adjusted. It would be actually very nice, and that didn't show me anything about the controllers. It'd be very nice if you could take off a lot of the components of a controller with just a few screws and then replace them, and potentially replace or clean the buttons or replace the joysticks. That is going to be the next generation of that I think is going to definitely be the next generation of
Give me that.
I probably could just attack now with something and win. Yeah, the next generation of controllers will definitely be a lot more serviceable and repairable. Do we have actual prices on these? Because the D-brand dark plates are $50. So if these new covers are more expensive than that, then that's gonna probably cause more controversy on that subject. Moving on, the Nintendo Switch and Call of Duty topped US game industry sales in November, according to Video Games Chronicles. I'll leave that article for you to read if you're interested in it. Good Old Games winter sale is now live, and it includes 4 free games. Which, let's see what the free games are, even though, frankly, me getting free games on Good Old Games really doesn't even matter. But Epic Game Store is going to be giving away 15 games, and Steam will probably not be giving away any free games. Good Old Games has been losing money. Let's see, Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun. And apparently the other 3 games are not listed. Let's see.
Are you ready for truth?
I have done the gods' bidding.
March on! I'm over
See if we can
here.
win here.
Impossible!
Past his blades in the east.
Yep. Okay, we can finally start looking at games now. I got the tabs down low enough. And so it's going to be a lot of yes-no stuff. Here we have a programming-based game, but I think I'd probably lean towards no. Even though it's rated positively. The problem with this actually just looks like programming. With actually no visual cover on it. Which if I'm going to start making a programming game, I probably would cover something like Uplink that has a little bit more visual on it. Or if I was just going to show real world programming and totally shift my YouTube channel away from covering video games for at least one series, I would just kind of show that. This is free to play single player. And seems like it's JavaScript programming. Yeah. Yeah, I just don't think there's enough game here where that would actually make it to the wish list. Here we have something called Luna Quest, which I suspect is just an asset flip game. Okay.
Remember, every droplet 100 droplets in a single flurry of droplets. A flurry of droplets. Oh, I'm such a wimp. A flurry of droplets. I'll be back for round 2.
There we go. Luna Quest is 11.19 English only. I think honestly we aren't going to be able to just even look at the prices. Yeah, I think we're just going to have to say no to that. By descending also we can pretty much show or assume is an asset flip fighting game. And some of these definitely came out on Friday. So it's not even like the more Japanese art style games are getting limited to Friday. It's pretty much anything that has some butts showing or live skin showing got limited, particularly this last Friday. Here we have something called Strip Fighter 5 Chimpocon Edition. Is this a fighting game where they lose clothes? Yeah, I guess it is. Mostly positive. $11.99. It's oddly not really tagged as having nudity in it though, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's there actually isn't. Well, we could just win this way. $11.99. Let's see what the adult content.
General,
yeah, it says skimpy character costumes, violence and bloodshed expressions. So as a game, I don't think you actually get anything other than skimpy costumes, which at a certain level you probably would want a little bit more than that, but maybe not. It also doesn't seem like there's an adult patch or anything, at least directly on the storefront, on the Steam storefront. Right, that's one. But apparently I should be playing ranked. Because I need to do that, don't I? Okay. So we've got to play ranked. And we maybe will win here. Here we have something called Scuba Splat, which looks like it's just an Among Us clone if I was to guess. Early access, free to play, in-app purchases. I'm going to say no to that. Here we have Monkey Doomsday, which I think we can very quickly see as a joke game, and we'll say no to that. $2.99. English allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Thorn of Wardelia, which looks badly animated as some kind of half RPG, half tactical RPG, or half visual novel, half tactical RPG. $1.79 English only. Here we have a game called Asylum of the Dead, which looks like it's standard zombie shooter survival game. The heads-up display here indicates to me it's not of a good enough quality, because that's a very generic life bar and well, life bar and zombie bar, I guess. I don't even know what that second one's supposed to represent. English only, $3.59. That's going to be a no. We have something that looks like it might be Chinese only, kind of an attempt at a Game Boy clone type game, but the resolution on it actually looks fairly high. And generally these Game Boy games, I hate the greenness on them. I hate the idea that they're just sticking to that square ratio as far as pixels and just thinking small in general. It's free. It's about 20 to 60 minutes, English and Japanese. So I guess if you want to check it out, it's free. And does support English, right? It says it does, at least. But yeah. Get rid of the green, stretch this out, and zoom in a little bit more is really what I want to see for any kind of game like this. And straight up, I want to see full remakes for modern PC gaming. I don't want to see ports of something or a homage to Game Boy gaming. This game, obviously, we can say no to. The world's hardest game, 3D, is just a bunch of polygons. $2.69, English only. Here we have a game called Keep Up Pirates, which looks like it's probably just an asset flip survival game. I'm not really seeing anything of interest. And see, at a certain point here, because we're going to have to just move fast, I am going to have to kind of ignore mob rule, because this is rated mostly positive right now, so I really should give it more of a shot. But yeah, I honestly don't think I'm going to play any kind of just generic survival game. It's a free-to-play game that seems to be focused around online co-op. Delicious Fruit World is just a platformer, so we can say no to that. Below Ocean looks like probably just a frustration precision platformer, so I can say no to that. Solo Reflection looks like it's probably an Arkanoid clone. Really? I think we can easily say no to that. I'm just going to scroll down as I'm saying no to show the price and the languages. Here we have Slitmouthed, which is the old Japanese horror story, but you can see it's already mixed, and it definitely looks like it is just an asset flip horror game. So we can say no to that also. Yeah, and the thing here is we're going to have so many games to cover today, and we're still going to end up saying no to probably almost everything, because it's not like good games are going to come out a couple weeks before Christmas. Shoot Vader's the beginning, though, does look slightly interesting in the fact that it's a shoot 'em up game that's more widescreen and seems to have several like upgrades. So I actually do want to give this a chance and put it on the follow. 749 English claims full audio. I suspect it probably doesn't. There also seems to be some sections where you have to fly through tunnels, which maybe that is the way to improve a game like Space Invaders, is to just have a different like section. Certainly when you think about Star Fox, if Star Fox is a late evolution of something like Space Invaders, then the fact that Star Fox had branching paths in sections where you really were just flying more than even shooting did break up the monotony of just always shooting. Here we have a game called Barbecue Simulator, The Squad, which I suspect is probably just an asset flip game that just has quite a bit of assets in it. That I do have to admit, it seems like somebody here has really tried to make a fleshed out and full environment by using a lot of assets. $1.69, several languages, but an actual gameplay here is completely missing. You're having a backyard barbecue, I guess, and that seems to be it. And much like the idea of having a simulator to do a real world job, having a simulator to enjoy a real world activity is kind of silly.
Loyalty is ironclad. March on! Harder armor, stronger armor. Steel yourself.
Hit that one. And then hit that one.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Leave that one, I guess. Here we have a game called Cleo: A Pirate's Tale, which is making an homage in this of the Pirates of the Caribbean. No, not Pirates of the Caribbean. Monkey Island game. This is a straight up visual homage of Monkey Island.
Did someone see me?
The rest of these screenshots look new, and the gameplay mechanics look new. They even say it's inspired by Zelda games and classic LucasArts games. So this definitely is up my style. This looks interesting to me. So I'll give it a follow. 1349 English and German full audio. Hopefully that is actual full audio. Although I wouldn't be completely dissuaded from covering it if it wasn't full audio. I'd just be upset in general.
One step closer to victory. I'm over here, youngling.
Fastest blades in the east.
Okay.
Shashing!
Steel yourself. Don't just stand there, pathetic.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
So yeah, we'll keep an eye on Cleo: A Pirate's Tale. And yeah, I keep putting effort into trying to win here and still getting my butt handed to me because I just don't have time to focus on Shadowverse. Here we have a game called Stick It that looks very pretty, but the description here doesn't really give me a lot of hope. It's tagged as a psychological horror / 3D platformer. Seems like maybe the idea is you can stick to things. Yeah.
To arms! There's a battle underway! Let the duel begin!
Yeah, I don't think there's a real game here. So we're gonna have to say no to that. Here we have a game called A Step Forward, which basically looks like a collection of ideas and not a real game. Could be a co-op game where you can barely control these giant bears. What's funny is this looks like somebody put a lot of effort to try and make it look like a real game, but when you actually see it in movement, you can kind of tell that there isn't any polish there. $4.99 English and Korean. I'm gonna have to say no to that. Should just probably let that run out. Here we have something called Lemon Run. That's one of the things about the Batman Telltale game too, is that Batman has more bat gadgets than you typically see in comics. He has like drones and scanners and frankly, most of the gadgets in the Arkham Asylum, Arkham City series is most of those gadgets are just things that are added to your outfit and you don't actually see them as their own separate device. Or if it is a separate device, you only use it a couple of times. Where pulling out a giant drone and then controlling a giant drone feels disconnected from Batman actually doing the actions himself. As for this game, Lemon Run, I think it's an infinite runner of no real interest, so I'm gonna have to say no to that. It's free to play.
Lots of bones, but make it
Virtual Aquarium overlay desktop game is probably not much of a game, so we can say no to that. Again, free to play. Here we have SCP Breakout, another SCP game. Doesn't look terrible though, but it doesn't actually look like it's showing you much either. It seems like it's probably player versus player focused, but I will give it a chance and put it on the follow list. If I actually had a video here to watch, I suspect I probably would dismiss it. And arguably, I should just dismiss any game that doesn't have a video to watch. But whatever, I'll give it a follow. Give it a chance. Here we have Nebula Invaders, which is obviously just a low effort clone of Space Invaders. And yeah, there's no reason I'd ever play a clone of Space Invaders. I barely would even cover Space Invaders for their historical relevancy. Interesting, where it seems like you can now have YouTube and Twitter links on your pages. Here we have a game called Lingo, which says it's a first-person puzzle game. It looks frankly too Minecrafty for its own good and feels like it very well is just something that has or could have been made in Minecraft to begin with. And yeah, that may be a little unfair to say this looks like Minecraft, or this should have been made in Minecraft, or very possibly was made in Minecraft and then ported over. And all of those are reasons why I'm not willing to pay $19.99. But $19.99 also outprices this just for its visuals alone, as way too expensive for what it's offering. Here we have a prologue game, so we can immediately dismiss this. Plus it looks terrible. Let's see, this looks like this is probably a Chinese RPG game that doesn't support English. Yep, $1.69, Chinese only, so we can eliminate that. Here we have something called Cloud Escape, which looks a little bit more visually polished as a parkour platformer game. So it probably deserves a chance.
prepare yourself.
But yeah, there might not be quite enough here for a real full game. Single player only.
Lots of bones.
It does definitely feel like one of these games that's designed for speedrunners, and then probably is fairly difficult or fairly minimal otherwise for regular players. Like, every mistake will be punished. Are you destined to escape the clouds? I think for just that tagline alone, I'm gonna say no, because it basically is selling itself as a frustration platformer game, and I don't want to play a frustration platformer. Here we have what looks like an RPG game that seems to maybe only fight 1 or 2 enemies, and that's it.
You see, I'm only
Here you have a description that sounds like it wasn't written by somebody who's a native English speaker. The assets are mostly free licensed by the company, by Unity Company. 59 cents English and Chinese. So, yeah. I don't think there's a real fleshed out game there. Here we have some kind of thumb-based rhythm game. There's probably a cell phone port. $6.79. One of the stories I did see was that Google Play is intending to try and bring over games and apps, I assume in general, to the Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever, PC in general. Which, that's a little scary, because it might be the beginning of them potentially abandoning Android. Although, even if Google completely abandoned Android, it would be fairly easy for people to take whatever version of Android is now and make their own forks. It would be probably worse, but like, Android wouldn't die overnight. It would take a while to create something to completely replace it. But also, bringing over cell phone apps to PC, whether games or not, is unlikely to really create a large number of useful apps that are on PC. Like, I have hundreds of apps, and with the exception of like Destiny Child, which is the lewd cell phone game I play, I don't think there would be any that I'd really want to put on my PC. Particularly since my PC doesn't have like Wi-Fi setups or cell phone setups, which most of the apps in one way or another use either the GPS, the Wi-Fi, or the cell phone connection. And anything else, there are better versions already available for PC. And it really is a step backwards to move an application from a portable device to a non-portable device in a PC, although laptops are portable. And for most people, you don't really need a PC at all. A lot of people don't need PCs at all, and they're either using it mostly just for gaming, or because they haven't learned how to do everything on their cell phone yet. But the dream of everybody having a PC is long since dead, and now people have cell phones, and that has been successfully accomplished, where you pretty much can't have a normal life without having a cell phone. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Time Runner, which looks like it's probably just an asset flip first-person shooter. Not really seeing anything here of real interest. 511, several languages. I'll say no to that. Here we have My University Girlfriend, which apparently is an elf girl in this screenshot. Now this looks like it's a dating sim game, but these blocks seem to be some kind of match 3 thing that you have to find the matches to clear the background image, which honestly that probably would be better than a lot of the other adult games that we have seen as far as the gameplay mechanic. It's 79 cents. English, Chinese, French, Italian, Japanese, and Korean way at the bottom. And then there's a free 18 plus DLC. So if this was the only game released on the weekend, I would not really have given it any real mention. But we're going to see quite a few of these adult games. And in this one, it is worth pointing out that this one actually was released today on Monday. So my narrative is not even fully proven here. Because in this instance, they did release this game somewhat early in the morning of Monday. But
Do not seek what is not
the only thing that would really break the narrative is if we consistently saw adult games releasing every day, and we saw adult games releasing particularly late in the evening on Monday, late in the evening on Tuesday, or at some point throughout Tuesday when most AAA games put out their news presses and their announcements.
Are you ready for true combat?
You refuse to listen.
Pathetic!
You are forgiven.
Got me feeling hungry.
As for my university girlfriend, it is just a general match 3 game, so obviously I'm not going to put it on the follow list. Here we have something called Spooky, misspelled.
All sin.
It looks uninteresting. Free English.
for the end is near.
Here we have what looks like a either Bejeweled game or a Puyo Puyo game. Kind of looks like a Puyo Puyo game. Nope. It's more of a click on the same colors Bejeweled game. Barely actually looks like an actual game at all if you can just click on things, and it definitely feels like it's a cell phone port.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
Alright. Hold this one, and this one.
A fitting end.
Die.
Attack that one. And return.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Questioning God's design is meaningless.
Here we have a game called Scrapland Remastered, which, if this is some kind of remaster of a game, it's being published by Mercury Stream, and I feel like I recognize that developer, but I definitely don't recognize this game. $17.99, single player with online PvP, allegedly full audio in several languages. Definitely feels like a 90s game. Mercury Stream is the developer publisher of the Castlevania Lords of Shadows game. Lords of Shadows. So, interesting. I guess I'm gonna have to put this on the follow list just to potentially get some user feedback and see if there was just a game that totally like avoided my attention.
Got a job to do.
1, 2, 3.
Die, creep.
How could you not understand?
Steel yourself.
Stop!
My loyalty is ironclad.
Next we have Love Notes, which looks like a Western visual novel game. I would say probably of no interest.
Do not seek what is not there.
$17.99,
Let us conclude.
English only. Seems like there might be some lewd outfits, but I bet you don't have any real nudity. Partially nude, and depictions of sexual acts. Seems like you can play as a guy or a girl, and you can basically romance any of the characters, which is nice, certainly. But they're saying it's a horror dating sim featuring 2 male and 3 female love interests. Just feels not like it's worth $17.99. Doesn't feel like there's enough game there. Maybe I'm being picky. Maybe I'm being a little unfair and intentionally avoiding the game because it is a more Western animation style.
Harder armor, stronger. Steel yourself. Steel yourself.
A fitting end.
But yeah, I think in a lot of ways it is just going to come down to personal visual style preference. And frankly, I'm going to end up rejecting the vast majority. The love notes aspect clearly shows that they're in some kind of band, or its focuses around music, which doesn't really change anything for me. Here we have something that I think we can easily dismiss. It's very inconsistent in its screen ratio also. Let's see. So no to that. I think we can easily say no to this just on the visuals. Let's see. Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. Actually, this might have been the game that XPlay just reviewed as a brand new game. Okay. The problem here with me personally playing Pocket Dungeon would be I didn't like Shovel Knight. It was too difficult a game, too frustrating a game. So if I was to come and play what is effectively maybe a Crypt of the Necrodancer / Tetris game and say, oh, I love this, I don't know to what extent that really helps anything, because people who are fans of Shovel Knights, of which there's a lot, will still be kind of peeved that I wasn't able to actually cover all of Shovel Knight and just rage quit on it. And I'm really just opening up a scab. And $19.99 is really expensive for that game. I'll put this on the follow list though, to consider it a little bit more. But
Thunder roars like a beast from the void.
One step closer to victory.
Past is my. You're weak.
Stop!
You're weak.
No!
yeah, I would have a hard time justifying
My thunderbolts shall guide you. If they
covering
don't
Shovel
kill you
Knight,
first.
but I'll give it a
This
chance.
turning out pretty useful.
Here we have something called Captain Meow, which really just looks like that other survival game we saw before. So we can easily say no to that. Here we have something called Legend of Nayuta from Boundless Trails, which is being published by NIS America and developed by Nihon Falcom PH3 Gimbal, or GmbH. This is not one of the JRPGs I particularly recognize, but clearly I have a bit of a bias for the visual style, so I think I'm going to put this on the follow list. Nope, I'm not, because it doesn't support English, which would also explain why I don't really recognize it that much. Storm.
Are you ready for true combat?
Oh man. Anybody had Storm, which would have been this and this. So I need this on the field. I need this
Fastest blades in the east.
here. Need this here.
This is our last push. I'm over here. Pathetic.
Now you've done it.
Shashing!
To make a wish come true.
What was I?
I shouldn't have attacked with this one, but I guess it doesn't matter.
Enemy or no?
If I could have just survived one turn, I could have won there because I could have played Coronation. But unfortunately, that is just constantly the problem. Is that if something happens, I could have won. But that thing never happens. Back to some more video game news. Assassin's Creed Valhalla's next expansion is leaked, most ambitious in his series history. They've officially now officially announced Dawn of Ragnarok expansion.
To arms. There's a battle underway.
Okay.
Mother, father, come on.
Does partial nudity, sexual themes? I didn't realize Assassin's Creed went that hardcore. The problem here, I think Assassin's Creed is running into, is that they are running out of history quickly. That there is not a lot of places to go otherwise. And here you have Video Games Chronicles writing a different article. They need to either fall back to the past again, which I don't think would enthuse that many people, or they just kind of need to put the series on a pause or a hiatus, and then fall back to the past, because I just don't see them moving further ahead, because at a certain point you're running smack into an era of like one of the Crusades, heavy Christian areas where they've danced around those areas for the most part, and those timelines, or you're going to the present day, and present day doesn't make a lot of sense too. It would be fairly bold to set it some time around 9/11 and have the assassins running around fighting the Templars to stop like 9/11 from happening and failing or something along that line, but I bet they wouldn't do that. So it's got to be some kind of future fictional present. I think as soon as you start to introduce guns, you've mostly run out of ideas, and they need to particularly like automatic guns. So I doubt they would ever do anything like Vietnam or World War I or World War II. Although arguably they should do World War I and World War II and try to touch upon that and try to have a trilogy just around World War I, a trilogy just around World War II. But yeah, they've already kind of abandoned what Assassin's Creed is as the style of gameplay. It seems like the next step will almost certainly be an abandoning of its general narrative, and there will be just games called Assassin's Creed that barely even have assassins in them. Or they go back even further to before Assassin's Creed Origins, and I don't think that works either. I think you probably, as far as Assassin's Creed end at the beginning of World War II, like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Again, I think that's as recent as you probably want to go. And unless they just want to have a fictional future timeline or a game that focuses on the fictional future timeline to just wrap up the story, which they probably should wrap up that future story. Moving on, apparently PS5 consoles will reportedly be in stock at the UK retailer Game on Tuesday. Remember, Video Games Chronicle is a UK company, apparently. Gamatsu says Record or Low Sword Dead Light in Wonderland has been delayed to January 28th in the West. So, a delay. Super Robot Wars and Super Robot Wars 30 versus Super Robot Wars DD crossover has been announced. We may have already covered that. I feel like we also covered Super Robot Wars series producer Takanobu Terada leaving BB Studio. Well, I think we had also covered that Valkyrie Entertainment has a support company for God of War, has been acquired by Sony. A lot of this news I think we did cover, and we didn't cover the games. Sniper Elite 5 is announced for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, due out in 2022. A action-adventure game called The Last Hero of Nostalgia has been announced for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. I don't think we covered this, but there may not really be a lot to cover at the moment. This is our first YouTube game, so first blurry video. Really have not put in the effort to go and check to see if the latest live streams have been content ID'd any more than normal. So the blurring may be completely unnecessary. Yeah, that trailer did not show us anything really. Scorn launches in October, which I guess they're not taking that as a delay, whereas Video Games Chronicle is taking it as a delay. A Memoir Blue launches February 10th, which is not something I recognize. I think I may have seen this when it was announced. And yeah, you do have this case where games get announced, and then games get a date announcement, and then if they're a Japanese game, they may get 5 different press releases in between the announcement and the date announcement, and then they're particularly Japanese games tend to have 5 more press releases after the date announcement. There's a lot of hype, to say the least, that goes on. Edge of Eternity launches February 10th for basically everything, according to Gamatsu. And this thumbnail definitely looks different than the actual trailer. I would kind of like to see Japanese RPGs get away from that idea too, of having box art and thumbnails that are flat 2D images, completely inconsistent with the with the actual gameplay footage. Like, it's very close to the idea of comic books having a different artist draw the covers, and then there basically being no connection to the cover and what is actually in the story. I don't see a way in which that isn't really just false advertising or bait and switch. Here we have a game on Steam called Perfect Heist 2, which I think we can immediately say no to. Still got a lot of games, I'm sure. We have a platforming game here called Inglorious Aztecs. which doesn't look bad, but it's a 2 to 4 player multiplayer game, online PvP, so I have to say no to it anyways. Here we have Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. I should mention, since there's so many tabs open right now, that I saw somebody post a error message from Chrome that says you don't have enough memory to open this page. I've never seen that in my life. That being said, I literally built a computer with either 32 or 64 gigabytes of RAM specifically because I knew I was going to open a ridiculous amount of tabs. Honestly, I've never seen Chrome use as much RAM as I have, though. If anything, I'm getting locked out of clicking on links on Twitter faster than any other problem, more than running out of RAM. And even if I opened a ton of tabs on Steam, they would eventually block me from opening more tabs.
My wings and heart cry for blood.
I should also mention that the log4j library that Minecraft said you needed to update your Minecraft servers and your Minecraft client for, apparently that's used in a lot of Apache setups and other open source builds. Anything that basically uses Java has a high chance of using that library. So there is a lot of people that need to update their builds.
Don't be shy.
But yeah, it's not super video game related. It does show a problem with relying on Java, and not even particularly Java, but just relying on a single piece of software and maybe not auditing the software that you're using in your builds. Particularly if you're a giant corporation, there should be security audits of the software you're using, and you shouldn't just be using open source software alone. That is kind of the problem with open source software, is often it's just one person working on the software and nobody's doing any kind of security audits or looking at the code. Or not enough people are looking at the code. Yeah, that can be dangerous. Although on the other hand, had Log4j been a proprietary software people were paying for, then the bug patch potentially would have never, the bug would have never been found, and it would have just been a secret vulnerability sold on the dark web and exploited. But yeah, generally I think most people should not be using Java at this point, because the core concept of Java is just no longer supported. And even Android, like if Google actually did stop supporting Android, just theoretically, it wouldn't be a terrible thought to try to white box build something that looked like Android that was not using Java or Java calls and all. Yeah, a pure Linux build, or a pure Linux based operating system that doesn't have Java as a middle ground would probably be nicer. I could see SteamOS potentially being, SteamOS, which I think is based off Arch Linux, I could see it potentially becoming a replacement for something like Android, where cell phones can just play games better and have better better software support and better hardware support, because they're just custom building their own versions of Arch Linux.
So, you saw through me.
There always is an argument for starting over from scratch, and most people never want to do that, but frankly, if Windows started over from scratch and said, we're not going to make Windows 11 because that's stupid, we're going to make a just completely different product that's not going to support really anything, that would be interesting. That certainly is what happens with Apple and iOS, is that there's very little compatibility or concern for backwards compatibility with iOS on Mac computers, Apple computers. Anyways, back to games. I don't have time to ramble. We have something here called Packing House, which looks like nothing of interest. $7.99 English and Polish. Feels like you're probably running a shipping and packing store as a business, which is kind of a unique job, but still not an interesting job. We have something called 100 Fires, The Rising of Red Star, Episode 1, which definitely feels like it's inspired by Metal Gear Solid. It very possibly is a one-for-one ripoff of Metal Gear Solid 1, which I can't really even hate it for that. So I'm going to give it a follow. $3.99 English, Spain, Spanish. Episodic, I don't like that idea, certainly, but whatever. Here we have a game called Sewer Rave, which looks like garbage and is tagged as a walking simulator, so we can dismiss that quickly. I wouldn't mind somebody just completely stealing the Metal Gear series and remaking it, as long as they can manage to not get copyright claimed and parody it more than steal it. Like, I think that would solve a lot of problems for Metal Gear fans. This game, Blue Fire Void Marker, looks like it's just really a 3D platformer with a lot of assets that you can place around. Level editor. Yeah, I think I'm gonna say no to that. We have a game called They Came From Below, which is some kind of tower defense game of no interest. Way too expensive. Am I ever gonna win if I don't play? No. Am I ever gonna get all the news done if I do play? No.
Each life has a different value.
A flash of metal, a silent night.
Paying more infinite. Let's have a look-see.
Give me peace.
Next we have a game that looks like just a World War II simulator of no interest. Let's see, $79.99. Well, they beat them to the $70 games. Yeah, it's really ridiculous to say $70 games are coming to Steam. There's been quite a few games that are ridiculously overpriced already on Steam. We have something called the Red Lantern, which looks like it's a snow hunting simulator. $19.99 English only. Well, I don't want to have to agonize over a game like this in particular, so I'll just put it on the follow list. It might be something to this, or it might be very minimal. Yeah, we have something I think we can immediately say no to. Yep. Here we have probably a horror asset flip game of no interest. Yep. Lost Alone, Little Sister, English Snipe and Spud. A uniquely Italian only game. still really just looks like a horror asset flip game, though. Really doesn't feel like there's anything special here. And then here we have a game called Nanny, which looks exactly like the previous game, except for uglier. So we'll say no to that. Here we have what might be a Chinese game called Sunny Cafe, or it might be a Japanese game. This feels like it's probably a half visual novel, half cafe simulator. 1104, Chinese only. So we'll say no to that. We have Monster Rancher 1 and 2DX. I think at this point, I see it's very positive. It passes the rules of having over 30 reviews. I'm going to put this on the wish list, but in reality, the only reason I'd ever cover this is if somebody gifted me the game, and frankly, I can't even make promises that I'd cover a game if people gift me games anymore, because I've just not really had the time and the energy to do that.
The hour of judgment has come.
But I guess if somebody did gift me, eventually, theoretically, if I live forever, I would check out these games. I probably only really want to spotlight them, though. I have no nostalgia or love for Monster Rancher. I've never played either one of the games before. I know it's basically like a Pokemon game, and in fairness, it may have predated Pokemon. But I just don't think there's a lot of desire there. Next we have Deflector Specimen Zero, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter. There might be something to this. Free, English only, but Specimen Zero is a demo effectively, so I don't really see a need to cover the demo, so I'm gonna say no to it. Here we have what looks like an asset flip game that I think we can quickly say no to. Online PvP focused anyways. Okay. If anything's gonna win, it's gonna be this.
Escape from the apocalypse to come.
So our pact is forged.
Let's see. Click on a tab and then just accidentally gets dragged all over the place. Redout 2 has been announced for basically everything, according to Gamatsu. Which, Redout 2, I guess, is the sequel to Redout 1. Which I think I'm confusing with Wipeout in my mind, but may not be a bad racing game. Dakar Desert Rally. Actually, I don't know how to pronounce that. It's been announced for everything. Looks like it's just several off-the-road style vehicles. The Grand Blue Fantasy Festival happened December 12th. And there must have not been a ton of announcements. Seems like they really are just maybe giving away costumes. And that seems to be about it. Because I don't think I've seen any other announcements or talk of around Grand Blue Fantasy.
Feel my fury. Rage empowers me.
Alright.
You disappoint me.
You're such a pain.
I have no regrets.
Cowardly creatures. Cowardly creatures. You're mean.
Let's see. I guess the announcements were Grand Blue Fantasy versus DLC character Vera and Avatar Belial launched December 14th, so 2 characters in the Fantasy Versus series, which I assume is a fighting game series. Yeah.
Like the moon
Again,
on the
this is
wall.
all just blurred. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink adds a PC version and the latest details in teaser trailer. So, I guess the question is this an actual fantasy game? It kind of looks like an RPG game. Although, I don't know if Relink maybe is a remake of like the first Grand Blue Fantasy or the latest one, or a sequel to the first one. Let's see if we can maybe get a description what it is. Yeah, I would seemingly have to figure out just the entire series of Grand Blue Fantasy. We click here. Games. Games in the series seems to be Relink and Versus. So, weirdly, that may be the beginning of this. Which is funny because I would have just sworn that there was something called Grand Blue Fantasy before this point. It's being made by Cygames, which is, I think, a Chinese developer. There is kind of a argument that even though I definitely am going to go through the Ni no Kuni series, there very possibly is only going to be a Ni no Kuni 1 and 2. So jumping over to something like Grand Blue Fantasy, which might have more sequels or might not, would make some sense. But also, arguably, maybe I should just stick with series that are already fairly established. It would make a lot more sense. Quickly, like, build up some endurance. Excuse me. Build up some endurance playing Ni no Kuni, and then work my way through either Dragon Quest or Neptunia or even Final Fantasy. The Atelier series or some of the Atelier series would make some sense too. NIS has launched a new title website featuring a pocket watch. I guess it says 3 days left, and that's all they really know or care to speculate. Still not getting quick disconnects, which would be about the only thing I could actually hope to have. Gamatsu has this week's game releases: Record of Lost War, Deadlight in Wonder Labyrinth, Death Smiles 1 and 2, and more. Which some of these are rebundles.
To arms! There's a battle
certainly.
underway!
Mother, father,
I,
come on!
this Hashihime of the old book town append is not a game I recognize. Even following Gamatsu fairly closely, there still seems to be some games that barely get any coverage. I also wanted to point out that December 13th in Japan is the 20th anniversary for the Fatal Frame Project Zero series, first game launched on the PS2. Does that mean anything? Not really. Because at the end of the day, we have the most recent Fatal Frame game that came out on Steam, and I'm just going to click here and check on its station. It was fairly poorly received originally. They must have fixed the bugs and glitches. Now it seems like it is being rated very positively. You can see that overall it was 76% positive, whereas it's 93% positive more recently. That may also just be that people figured out that the Fatal Frame series is a lower budget title and they're appreciating it regardless. Hopefully this isn't a case where people are just actively reviewing it positively in hopes that more remakes will get made, but even that is a fairly valid reason to try and manipulate votes. There's no big announcement or even seemingly a sale going on right now, or any kind of push. No DLC, like thank you for the, well, there is DLC, but it is being sold for $16. That's pretty bad, and it's just, I think, another example of Japanese companies not really doing well by their consumers and their customers. Here we have a game that looks like it's probably a low effort visual novel,
I'm not lonely. Not
kind
with
of
everyone
horror
around me.
story.
Glad you're here.
English and Japanese, $5.39. I think we can pretty much say no to that. We have a game called Bric-a-Brac, which definitely looks like asset flip hidden object game, so we'll say no to that. Here we have a RPG game, it looks like, of no real interest. Seems like maybe you play as a monkey in a small adventure game. It's free. Whatever. I mean, it's English only. It's 20 or 30 minutes of gameplay. Do have this sale going on. Up to 90% of the geisha games. It's probably not a bad sale. I wouldn't be surprised if none of these games are actually discounted when the winter sale happens. That being said, scrolling through these geisha games, not a lot of quality that I'm saying here. A lot of this is just RPG Maker games, or straight up just selling RPG RPG Maker elements. Here you have a bundle for $145. Here you have a Hatsune Miku VR game for $54. These prices are really, really expensive. And definitely some of these games are either not made by the geisha or just are not discounted in any way. So you kind of have a non-sale happening here. And yeah, at a certain level, yes, when you start to get into more niche titles, you tend to never see them really go on discount, particularly Japanese titles, but I think it's fairly disingenuous to say up to 90% off when it seems like there's probably only one thing in total that is actually 90% off.
Welcome back to the land of the living.
May happiness be with you.
Meanwhile, on the Steam front page, there's nothing really special going on. This is a fairly old game to be still promoted, but whatever. But yeah, I don't check these games that are on these slight sales, and certainly there are some trickery here, that getting Borderlands 3 for $15 sounds good, but then you're probably going to have to buy a whole bunch of DLC to get it back up to $60 or $70, if not more. Whereas Guardians of the Galaxy might be a decent thing at $40, but arguably it probably should be $40 anyways. Interesting that they're even promoting the Steam Deck at this level. It's not like they have any actual products to sell there. Your standard discovery queue and your standard just recommendations. It has been a while. Here you have like an adult game, still in the new and trending games.
You did good.
So even the fact that an adult game actually may be getting held back to a Friday release, it definitely feels like there are some adult games that break through the manipulation and manage. Liberty City here is like $6. They still manage to catch people's attention, and that's inherently what we have to come to reality to, is that there are just a lot of for lack of a better description, horny gamers out there. Wow. And that is one of these games that immediately has a screenshot of full nudity.
There's a battle underway.
Is fighting and despair all you know?
Which they really need to fix that. Gamer Girl Cyberpunk 2069 looks like it's mostly a Tetris game and mostly just a nudity game. And like half of these screenshots are just full on nudity in the screenshots. They need to be censored. Even though it is behind the adults only banner, it's still weird, even for adult sites. Very rarely do you not censor the screenshots. And part of that is because you only have so many screenshots in the first place. So if you're uncensoring the screenshots in the advertisement slots, then you're giving away the golden goose effectively. Yeah, that came out on the 11th, so that would have been the weekend, and still it caught a bunch of people's attention, which arguably Valve might make the argument that it doesn't matter when they release games, but that argument really falls apart because we know, or it seems fairly obvious, that they are intentionally only releasing adult games on the weekend, where they release everything else at random times.
Got me feeling hungry.
And even if you had an employee who only, like, if there was only one employee out there that was looking at all the games that were being released via Steam Direct, and they only wanted to look at adult games on a Friday, if they just were faster about it, or if there was just a week delay required, a minimum of 7 days required to submit your game before its actual release date, you could still work around that. It's totally possible for somebody to say, I want my game to come out on Tuesday, and then Valve come back and say, okay, all games have to be submitted 7 days before their release date. And if it's an adult game and that employee only looks at adult games on Friday, they still could approve it and allow it to be released on that next Tuesday. And there's probably a lot of that kind of backlogging happening as far as Steam releases anyways. So you don't have to force everything to be on the weekend. This is definitely an intentional action that they seem to be taking. effectively segregating the games by genre. Moving on, we have a game called Buffet Night here, which it looks like there might be something here worth giving it a follow. It very possibly is not enough of a game. It's free. It's like a game jam game. It's English only. Yeah, I guess I would just say check this game out as a kind of game jam. I really don't have interest in covering games like that though, that are just really short game jam games. I really feel like those deserve to probably not be on a storefront for finished consumer products, polished for consumer style products.
It looks like I'm up.
Like, arguably a category or a separate storefront would better suit the consumer instead of like it's the equivalent of going into like a movie section of a Walmart and then right next to a DVD you might for a single movie you might have a DVD box set of TV's shows that's an entire season or entire series, and then right next to that you might have a single episode. That's just weird, and you wouldn't do that. That there are movie sections, there are TV sections, and the TV sections are not usually subdivided between box set for the entire series and the entire season, but they're usually fairly well labeled. And if there was any kind of like single episode teaser free videos out there, they would be in their own section also, and almost certainly that would just not be worth the shelf space, and Walmart wouldn't actually allow those kinds of content.
Do nothing.
They definitely were, for like movie rental places at one time, collections of trailers and teasers that were given to video rental stores in the old day.
Is that how you treat a lady?
But what they mostly would have done is had that playing on the TVs in the video rental store, and it would be a single special tape or DVD that was playing on a loop, not something that you would give away to the end user, the consumer. Moving on, we have this game Barry, which I think we can dismiss. Doesn't visually appeal to
The
me.
real battle begins.
Let's see. Here we have something called B Retold Story, which looks like some kind of point-and-click adventure game. What's interesting, though, is it looks like it's a brand new game. English is not supported, $4.49, Russian only. It's kind of a shame, because the animation here doesn't look that awful. Doesn't look like they're just trying to make a joke out of it. Yeah, I suspect we will see more of these games, particularly because of the pandemic. People working in small groups, programming games, not being able to dream as big of having animators or giant teams that would make a more traditional style game, and so instead they are focused on making something smaller and then point and click and using their talents.
Who will be my victim today?
Is that how you treat a lady?
As actors, or they're discovering if they have talents as actors instead of trying to find animators. But again, I guess it's a shame that's Russian only. Here we have something called Voice, which looks like might be a Chinese or Korean visual novel. Seems kind of low effort, though. It's a story about living in a dystopian world where speaking is forbidden. Interesting idea, certainly, that could never be actually implemented. Like, if speaking was forbidden, at a certain point you would like inject something into people's vocal box or tongue to make it impossible to speak, or sew their lips shut. And then blanket limitation on communication really just does not feel like any society would tolerate that.
You refuse to listen.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
You would probably avoid a lot of conflict that way, but yeah, this is one of those stories that's so extreme and so out there, it just doesn't actually make sense. $13.29, Korean only. But yeah. Korea, even South Korea, is fairly totalitarian, but there is at least some logic in some of their rules. Like, severe rules against littering and like chewing gum and spitting it out on the ground. I think chewing gum in general is just illegal. Maybe in public, maybe anywhere.
Sorry, I've no bone for the likes of you.
But the idea of just not speaking at all is kind of ridiculous.
This armor's turning out pretty useful.
Let us conclude.
Moving on, we have a game called The Wishing Stone, which is tagged as a visual novel point-and-click game. Seems like it might have some puzzle element to it. Too, maybe not so much. Maybe just a couple of puzzles. Let's see, $8.09, English and Chinese. I'll give it a follow. It's probably not much of anything, though. Here we have a Flappy Bird clone that we can quickly dismiss. Here we have a game called Lucky's Tale, which I think we'd already kind of seen this as a potentially interesting platforming game. $17.99. New Super Lucky's Tale is apparently different than Lucky's Tale, though. And so you have a VR game only. Interesting. So then there's Super Lucky's Tale from 2008. And then there's New Super Lucky's Tale. So this one's on the wish list as Super Lucky's Tale. Apparently you can't buy it, you have to buy the bundle to get New Super Lucky's Tale, which probably is just a remaster of the original game. Arguably, maybe Lucky's Tale as a VR game is just a VR version of New Super Lucky's Tale or Lucky's Tale. May have actually been able to win there and didn't pay attention enough. Oh well, here we have a game I think we can easily dismiss. Looks like an asset flip RPG. Here we have a tower defense game, Reforged. We can dismiss that. It's also way too expensive. Okay.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
Okay.
Hands up!
What was I?
I like. Give me that.
Hands up!
How could you not understand?
Hands up!
Still didn't move fast enough. So I've lost. Here we have a game called Hidden Magic Town, which seems to be a hidden object game of a different style.
The real battle begins.
But I still don't think there's really anything there.
Two?
You crusty horseshoe!
So new to that. Here we have something called Wandering Trails, a hiking game. This doesn't look as good as some of the other hiking games I've seen, so I think I can dismiss this. Also, it's very easy to make an asset flip forest and then call it a hiking game. I want to see a little bit more gameplay actions. Here we have Trans Ruby, which I believe we talked about on Friday, but didn't actually make it to looking at. So I am going to put this on the follow list. It could be something of interest, or it could also just be a frustration platformer, though, so I'm not 100% sold on it. Here we can dismiss Ball Roll as an infinite roller very quickly. Still waiting for the second dinner collectible Marvel card game to come out. Like, hopefully I have a lot more enthusiasm for playing that game, and it's a lot easier to win at that game when it does come out.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
Here we have something called Pet Idol,
All you know?
which seems like it's kind of a city simulator more than just even a pet simulator. Seems like there's a lot of decorations and probably a premium currency and microtransactions from the looks of it. Looks like one of those mobile games. Yeah, it's got in-app purchases. Like, none of these games are ever really that fun. It's Simpsons Tapped Out is kind of the basic example of this that I played for a long time. But you really don't do that much. You really can't succeed that much without premium currency, and even if you did have premium currency to purchase everything, you're still not really doing anything. You're just decorating a town, you're making a model, and as someone who like effectively is making a model with Legos in the real world, I can kind of understand that, but I really can't. Excuse me, I should have muted myself there. I'm wearing out my voice too. So I think we may very well get all of the news covered and then just call it a day. I'm going to mute myself and just try and cough it out. Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll finish as soon as we're done with all the news and games. Witchcraft U is a text-based game, which we still are occasionally seeing those, although there were several weeks where we weren't seeing any of those. Cursed Island here looks like nothing really of interest. A platformer seems like. What languages? Several languages, we'll say no to that. Mugen Abisu. Looks like it's probably an asset flip game too. It's far too much fog, and pink fog in particular, for its own good. $1.19 English only. Is cheap, but still not cheap enough to justify low quality. Here we have something called Loop Odyssey. Is this from the creator of Loop Hero, or is this a Loop Hero clone? In a lot of ways, this looks like they've taken the idea of Loop Hero and made it a little bit more visually appealing. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a follow. $6.39. Frankly, if I could get something like Loop Hero or Loop Odyssey to work as an idler game instead of Shadowverse, there is an argument for that. Yeah. See, I don't know if Loop Hero itself is an idler game. It might be a little bit more interactive than that. And I would have to buy Loop Hero, or somebody would have to gift me Loop Hero to justify playing it consistently. Yeah, I'm not really seeing an idler game though as a tag, so Loop Odyssey may be better than for me. So I'd almost feel justified in playing this, purchasing this, spotlighting this, and then going back to Loop Odyssey. And saying, yes, this is a Loop Hero clone, but this has done something, made it into an idle game where Loop Hero was more interactive. Could also be that Loop Odyssey is just in no way connected to... It's actually a very, very different game to Loop Hero, and it just looks very similar to try and create some confusion. And at a certain level, it obviously is just a confusion-based game, a name confusion-based game that is trying to convince people that this is the original. Here we have a Zumba clone, Marble Puzzle Blast. What is it for? $7.99 English only? They're oddly comparing it to Honey Pop. I heard a game publisher that I follow on YouTube say that Steam is actually really, really good about getting impressions for your game and getting wishlist likes for your game as a small independent like publishing game developer. That I'm not sure I see that, but I could definitely believe that there's just so many people on Steam and so many varieties of players on Steam that yes, any kind of game, even something as simplistic as a visual novel, which there are dozens released in a week of visual novels, maybe their algorithms are better at advertising even than like Google's AdSense algorithms might be, or any other advertisers' algorithms might be. And they do get the visual novels in front of the people who are interested in it. A lot of that, I think, probably comes down to the disconnect, I imagine, comes down to the fact that I'm looking at every single game that comes out, and then it's trying to connect the dots to games that really I have no connection to when it suggests games. But if I was shopping like a normal person and just looking at the front page of Steam, for the most part, even though it's fairly repetitive and just suggests the same things over and over again, it does do a fairly good job of suggesting the games that I probably would be interested in, based on things I've wishlisted and followed. Plus, they have that whole curator feed where that is effectively showing you 10 of the most recent games that it thinks you might be interested in. And I bet that helps discoverability also. There is still a big divide though above the fold where games are paying for placement and advertisement, because there are definitely games there that I would never consider playing. Speaking of games I'd never consider playing, World War II Tanks Battlefield is one I think we can easily say no to. Here we have a game called Stuffed. It's a first-person shooter shooting monsters and stuffed things. Is it in VR? No. Single player online co-op? Procedurally generated first-person shooter. Like enemies come in waves. I don't think there's enough of a game here, frankly, and the gun is too big for its own good. It's taking up a massive amount of the screen space, and the angle is low because you're assumedly a kid. Yeah, I just don't want wave-based shooting as the only concept. Maybe you're playing a stuffed bear shooting the monsters, protecting the girl. I guess that's the idea. You know what? I'm going to give this a follow, though. Anyways. Just because I think there might be some effort being put into this. This game, Witchwood, looks visually polished enough to deserve a follow. Some kind of RPG with crafting in it. $17.99. English, Japanese, Chinese. We have a racing game called Kyo. It's hard to tell whether it's going to be a good racing game or not. It's easier just to dismiss this. Or not, because apparently the game is either free or they were giving it away for free or what? How is this in my library? This came out December 9th. And apparently they were just straight up giving it away for free. And see, that's always weird. Like, I should probably disclose, yeah, it was straight up free. I should disclose if I get a game for free, but by the time I get around to actually playing a game, I've completely forgotten about the price I paid for games anyways. So I've pretty much stopped considering the price of games as a factor and instead consider the amount of hours or the amount of entertainment in the amount of hours. Because yeah, it really is not affecting me. I should disclose if I got a game for free. I have not gotten any games for free, specifically for being a YouTuber. There have been sales and just free giveaways that I've grabbed a couple of free games. Often I don't even get around to doing that much.
To arms! There's a battle
But yeah,
underway.
I don't consider the amount of money I spend on a game, really. It does kind of suck that I spent like $10 on the Shadows version of the Telltale Batman game, and I mentioned that, but I almost never talk price. Moving on, DNF Duel has yet another trailer for yet another character. Check that out on Gematsu if you're interested. A game called Undecember launches January 13th in Korea and early 2022 worldwide. You know, you have a naked flower lady. Let's see. We'll come over here and see what this Korean showcase video is showing us. Well, the trailer is showing me a cutscene, but the actual gameplay seems to be more top-down hack and slash Diablo-esque gameplay.
Oh, are you in
Doesn't
need of
look
medicine?
bad, but I also have to wonder if there's really a single player experience here, or if this isn't just a MMO. Undecember is being published via Line Games. So yeah, here's some gameplay. Just high action, top down, beating up a lot of people. It's not too different from like a Warriors game, really. Which in all fairness, the There's Gear and Runes and Zodiac, which I assume is probably a skill tree. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's just a skills tree. Yeah, I guess I should have read a little bit more, and we'll find out more about it later when it actually comes out worldwide. But I do think the Diablo games in particular would be better if they were very consistent as far as high action experiences. Although, in all fairness, Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 are pretty high action already, so I don't know if you really need twice as many enemies or twice as fast of an attack cycle. Probably wouldn't hurt, though. Here, a PC game called Wizardry of the Five Ordeals for Steam launches December 17th, according to Gamatsu. No editor service at launch. This looks like a fairly old game getting re-released, though. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba has another update with some more demon characters in the fighting game. It really is getting, like, so far down the rabbit hole with these announcements that I've skipped so many. I'm starting to forget that this is a fighting game, because with just the stationary images you could almost expect it to be a visual novel or RPG game. Let's see. We already talked about the PlayStation covers and DualSense controller colors. Forspoken's had a hands-off preview, gameplay, and whatever. Does seem like there are some more things being shown here as far as actual gameplay. Several websites. Some of these websites I don't even recognize. Like 4gamer.net, never heard of it. Arexzi Gaming, Bahamut, never heard of. Famitsu I definitely recognize. And then IGN I definitely recognize, and IGN took down their video apparently.
My dreams are what kept me alive. Damn.
So yeah.
Enemy or no, you did good.
Seems like you are just kind of running around doing the standard RPG, action RPG experience. Particularly for Westerners, I think the question will be, what makes Forspoken interesting and different compared to any other RPG game that came out? Is it just because it's slightly more Western focused and slightly less fantasy? Or is it going to have a different story or a different gameplay concept that really appeals? It does still kind of feel like it is just Scalebound 2.0 with a different character and less dragons. Something that was hyped about and didn't really have any real reveals of the story. Here we have a game called After the Fall Launch Edition, which is apparently from Arizona Sunshine, the team that made Arizona Sunshine, and is yet another VR shooter game that doesn't look terrible. It also seems like it may have some online focus in VR only. Let's see. Arizona Sunshine as a VR game is rated very positively, whereas some of their other games I guess they've been focusing mostly on VR games, so that's why I haven't really seen anything of interest from them kind of lately. Here we have a mixed reviewed game already, so I think we can probably say no to that. Still got a ton of game. Here we have a Young Maiden Otome visual novel. That's what it's tagged as. Doesn't look particularly that interesting. Coming soon. Or buy Act 1 for $20, English and Russian languages. We have some kind of asymmetric VR game called Do You Copy? Which visually looks really, really bad. Early access, $10. Allegedly full English audio. Here we have another Otome visual novel game where the animation doesn't look particularly great. So I think we can really leave that. That is a really big branch tree. Let's just get back to that screenshot. That is a lot of branching paths for a story. $17.99, rated M for mature, they claim. I bet it really wasn't rated though. Problem with something like this is if it's rated M for mature, and even it does have says it has partial nudity and sexual themes and violence. It seems like it's more disturbing on the violence front. But like for this art style, it's not like these are particularly good looking characters. So yeah, it's too soft, too kind of airbrushed in its art style for me personally to be interested in seeing any of the characters naked. Here we have another Flappy Bird clone we can immediately say no to. Here we have 2048 Royal cards, which is apparently solitaire, but 2048. It's an interesting thought, at least. I'm going to put this on the follow list. I don't know if there's real value in playing solitaire and 2048 combined, but it's trying something different. We have something called Welcome to Your Immune System, which looks like it's probably just a asteroids clone, staying in the middle, shooting enemies, shooting viruses and germs. You can say no to that. Here we have another game I think we can easily dismiss. We have Sharknado VR, which I wonder if that is really connected to the VR, the Sharknado movie series. 99 cents is fairly cheap for a VR game. It's really too cheap. I'm gonna put this on the follow list just to see if somebody says anything there's anything interesting there. The problem there certainly is going to be that Sharknado is a cheap kind of joke, low effort movie series. It's not super cheap, but it's relatively cheap compared to regular movies. And a VR game based on it could be even cheaper. This Ricochet game, obviously, we can say no to. Here we have a deck building game, which looks like it's not very visually polished either. So yeah, let's say no to that. We have something called Zoo Seeker, which is either a hidden object game. Yeah, that's what it is, a hidden object game. Or a Zoo Tycoon game was my other guess.
Like the moon on
We
the
can
water.
say no to that. Here we have a game called Ashi, which I feel like I had heard about a game called Ashi, but it didn't look like this. So I must be thinking of a different game. This looks like just a very generic, maybe Korean platforming game. $9.99, English and Korean. I'm not seeing anything there of interest, so no. We have something called Ceilings, which some kind of sandbox game monster, bug simulator, or wildlife simulator. $7.99, several languages. I think we'll say no to that also. Apparently GTFO has been out for a long time, but in an early access state, so it's now just like finally out of early access. The problem here is it's online co-op only, so for me personally, I'm going to say no. But obviously there is a significant number of people who have really liked it, and this doesn't seem to be a case where they have put out the last patch and they're just abandoning the game at this point. Frankly, the name GTFO is a little too hardcore of a title for a series, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to make a sequel series that's very similar to this game with a different title in the next few years. Sludge Fighters, I think we can obviously say no to. Then here we have another one of these games that's showing a little bit more skin than I imagine YouTube family friendliness wants to show. The Lover of My Dreams is tag nudity and sexual content. A lot of the screenshots are censored, but blurred, but a large amount of underboob on one screenshot is very high. It seems to me like it's slide puzzles.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
$1.39.
This one's for my family.
Jigsaw puzzles, several languages. It actually, even though it's tagged with nudity as a tag, the actual mature content description implies that they actually never get nude. They're just showing a lot of skin and skimpy clothing. So, yeah, there's nothing there. But that is yet another example of an adult game that was specifically held back for the weekend release. Like, we've seen 4 or 5 of them that came out over the weekend, and we saw exactly maybe 1. I would say probably 0 the 5 days before that. Here we have a game called Mr. Bottle and His Dream, which looks like it's probably a joke game
No beast could manage
more
this.
than something that actually has gameplay mechanics you'd want to play. $2.39 English Chinese. Zombie Crush VR we can probably dismiss fairly well. Actually, it looks fairly nice. I guess the real question is just how many zombie VR games do you need? Yeah, I guess I'll put it on the follow list. Cave Stories Secret Santa. I assume this is a special spin-off of the Cave Story series from Nicholas. It's free, English and Japanese. It's rated positively. I guess Nicholas, being the people that made Binding of Isaac Rebirth, to have my attention, and we can see Cave Story Plus is something on my wish list. So yeah, the Secret Santa would be one to play and cover as a spin-off game or free thing, which I very rarely do that, but every now and then I'll cover something that is a spin-off free game if it's more than just a demo. Here we have Boxed In. I think we can pretty well ignore any box pushing games. Here we have Memory Puzzle Mermaids, which is just a match 2 with some 3D CGI mermaid characters. There's a huge bundle here of games discounted significantly. 90 items, which clearly what they're trying to do is imply that there's some value in these games, whether it's adult content or scantily clad mermaids, but I'm not really seeing it as an actual quality gameplay element. Here we have another game tagged nudity called Late Photographer, which, let me check these screenshots just so that they're YouTube family friendly. I think they are. So you've got kind of scantily clad outfits, asset flips, and then the characters just posing in the outfits. This is free, and then there's $8 for a swimsuit party, which I suspect the swimsuit party has interesting. In the game, they wear sexy clothes exposing the abdomen and thighs, but not sensitive parts. And there are some drinking scenes. Yeah. Pretty much if you see a Chinese game that's trying to sell on sex, there tends to be a very high chance that you're not actually going to see anything as far as actual explicit nudity. Here we have a game called The Timeless Child Prologue, which is interesting because The Timeless Child was what they were calling Doctor Who for a few seasons. That doesn't immediately mean this is a Doctor Who game, and almost certainly it isn't looking at it. 2-player puzzle co-op game. I think what I'll have to do, though, this is an interesting image. Seems like there are no real characters. I'll have to say no to this because it's a prologue, and then see if the actual game ever comes out, and then put the actual game on the follow list. We have VR Crazy Racing, which
could manage this.
Doesn't look like anything worth following. It's too cheap for a VR game also.
I have to stop standing in place.
Here we have Color Flash. I think we can say no to that. The Game Awards definitely put me far, far behind. We can say no to Moto Roller also. Like, looking at all those trailers. And I don't know how I could have really fixed that other than potentially leaving a lot of the Game Awards trailers and news for Monday and keeping it a little bit more separate. But at the end of the day, one thing or the other was going to get added to a backlog. We have this game, The Tourist. I think there's some value in following this just to see how people receive it. But generally, I'm not certain what real gameplay is actually in this. If it's like half adventure, half just wandering around the city, it seems like. Story of Bill Bear. I think we can say no to this. Feels like a Russian or Chinese game. Yeah, English Russian, $5.59. Too expensive too. Roof Genocide, I think we can say no to. Doesn't really look like there's enough there. If anything, I kind of feel like I'm probably overemphasizing how many adult games came out over this weekend, because it really is 5 or 6. It's never a high number. It just never really boils down to that. But yeah. Gamatsu, I can see the beginning of the end, by the way, now, finally. It says Scrapland Remastered is now available for PC. It's a remastered version of Mercury Stream's debut game.
A pointed sword deserves a pointed
which I
response.
assume that
how would you like to end?
Scrapland must have sold fairly well when it originally came out to help Mercury Stream stay in business. I don't know if it's really worth it to watch the blurry trailers. In a lot of ways, I imagine Scrapland is a game of its time that would be really hard to cover or play for not a really good reason to play it. A game called Trek to Yomi has a gameplay trailer. This is, I think, the first I've heard of this game. Rated M for mature, for blood, violence, and gore. No, I think I have heard about this. The black and white side-scrolling hack and slash game. Interestingly, he's moving from the right to the left instead of the left to the right. I feel like at some point you're going to have to just let the player flip the screen if that's going to be the case, because that's going to feel very awkward. And it might be an intentional hint that this guy is not progressing forward in his life. He's going back for revenge or something along that line. A game called the Anacrusis, yeah, launches January 13th. Fight against alien hordes to unlock perks, weapons, and new ways to play. According to Gamatsu. I wonder if this is the guy I'm thinking of. Is this somebody I recognize? Nah, that really wouldn't make a lot of sense, because there's a video game guy called Will Smith, not the actor Will Smith. And I'm half wondering if that is that guy. But I don't think it is, because the actor, not the actor Will Smith that I'm thinking of that used to be part of Tested, which at this point Tested.com has failed, and even Adam Savage buying out Tested, he showed up on an interview for X-Play and G4, so I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see like Tested get shut down and Adam Savage move on to some other service. It almost makes sense to move Tested into X-Play and G4, but it's not video game related, but G4 in general needs new shows and new concepts. And it doesn't matter if that's Will Smith or not, though. Will Smith left Tested to work on a VR company that would make VR content, but not specifically video games content. GameDeveloper.com basically has very little. There's a feature here on 4-day work weeks, lessons from the game industry and beyond. There's different ways you could do 4-day work weeks, like having Wednesday off, for instance, is probably not the best way to do a 4-day work week, but it has worked for some people. More than likely it would be have either Monday off or Friday off, and I could see Friday being the day off. And there's definitely ways to implement a 4-day work week and then still have the exact same amount of workload. And personally, I can't help but suspect that a lot of people who are pushing the idea of a 4-day work week are trying to do more of a bait and switch or a distraction move away from what people really want, which would be either universal basic income, which I think people, when they really think about it, want that, so that they can choose to not work or work at any point instead of being forced to work at specific times or specific days. Or people want less hours for the same pay, and a 4-day work week does not really address the amount of hours or the amount of pay. So you could easily do a 4-day work week at 10 hours a day, and you'd still be doing 40 hours a week, and that's not really what people want either. And it's fairly common for advocates on one side, or people in general, just to try and create wedges or confusion, confuse the issue, and
Scatter like the blossom.
promote one thing to one group and promote another thing to a different group, so nobody there is on the same page. And in all fairness, there's literally no lessons that should be taken from the video game industry at all, because the video game industry as a business is run awfully. We hear that all the time from GameDeveloper.com in particular, of just the abuses and the terrible way business is run. The cost and expenses of developing a game have just skyrocketed over and over again. The pay of CEOs has skyrocketed all over the place. Like, there's really not a single thing, I think, that there is to learn specifically from the video game industry, that other than don't be like the video game industry. Moving on, apparently an Activision Blizzard exec issued an anti-union message to employees. Brian Bolato was previously alleged to be a bully at the State Department during the Trump administration. Which, yeah, there's really no reason to send out any kind of message like that at all at this point. Like, that kind of attempt at union busting may very well work before it's a huge news story, but the second you have the cameras on you, it's too late to try anything like that or try and convince people. Like, it is a complete misunderstanding of how upset and irate the employees seem to be at Activision Blizzard, and have been seemingly for a while, and they're fed up with it. Okay. Do this.
Life's a gamble. May as well have fun.
And then GameDeveloper also at GameDeveloper.com also has a report here. Revelations emerge about a toxic work culture at Bungie. Current and former Bungie employees speak out against abusive conditions at the company. And at a certain point, we've had so many of these that I've kind of tuned out to actually trying to even find the actual accusations, and particularly if GameDeveloper .com is writing an article.
Useless puppets get no love.
Yeah, so like I was just saying, don't use the don't use the game industry as a model for any kind of business. That's ridiculous.
The hour of judgment has come.
Okay.
I have to fix myself up.
I've lost, but maybe not. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com. Google plans to bring Android titles to Windows in 2022. We'll launch a Google Play Games app for Windows laptops, tablets, and PCs. Okay. seems like it is specifically games that they're focusing on, which is maybe an admission that almost none of the other apps on the Play Store are that useful. I could see Google even trying to just severely limit or get rid of a lot of apps that aren't games, because they're wasting their servers time.
My beloved little sister.
Like the moon on the water.
Here we have yet another adult game called Fruit Night Fair, which looks like it's a Fruit Ninja clone with seemingly Ninja Star and some lewd outfits. It's tagged with sexual content but not nudity, $1.79. Yep. Revealing clothing and suggestive thing. If anything, particularly this week, they really held back a lot of games that were just lewd instead of nude, that just had skimpy clothing, which, if anything, that is an escalation of the putting the thumbs on the scale as far as bundling everything together in one release. Here we have a game called Nevermore, The Chamber Door.
There's a battle underway.
Says it's a hack and slash game inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. Not really seeing a lot here that would interest me. $4.79 English only. I'll give it a follow. We have about 10 more games, and then we need to go through the Twitter tabs again, and then we'll call it a day. Let's see, Charades Movie 1 we can say no to. We have Doomsday Scavenger, which looks like it's a Chinese low effort asset flip. 84 cents English and Chinese. We have one called Beard of Stone, which looks like nothing of interest. $13.49, it's pretty expensive. We have Cat Box Paradox, which looks like nothing. Here we have a game called Ghost Hunter, which looks like it is a party game, so I probably couldn't cover it. Plus, it doesn't really look like that much. Kind of looks like a cell phone game being ported, or a Chinese game in general. Free to play, online focus, co-op focus, Chinese only. So lots of reasons to say no to that. And we have another jigsaw puzzle game with lewd, scantily clad information. Odd that it's being labeled as a clicker though, because clearly it's a jigsaw puzzle game. Girls in their underwear. Like, normally these would not be held in that same category. And see, unless there's just something I don't understand about Chinese and Asian game releases, like this is the season, or there was some kind of adult video game expo that happened and this is why all these games are being released now. Like, it really feels like Valve held maybe a month's worth of games to all be released on the same weekend. This Connectify game looks completely uninteresting. And here we have another game with what looks like scantily clad outfits. It looks like it's mostly an RPG maker, maybe with some rhythm gameplay mechanics. And see, typically we see at least one or two of those released every week. English, Japanese, and Chinese. But actually seems to be not even saying there's any nudity. And usually when you have these like RPG maker type of games, they tend to have adult patches somewhere that add in the nudity. Alpha Shark is kind of a breath of fresh air, no pun intended. We saw so many adult games. It's not like I specifically even curated a selection of adult games. Just a bunch of adult games. They all seem to be coming from different companies. They all seem to be slightly different in style. And I don't think Alpha Shark has enough gameplay here. I'll give it a chance though. We have Retired Men's Nude Beach Volleyball League, which I think is mostly a joke at that point. As far as a game, $6.29 is too expensive. I don't think that you're gonna have really great volleyball gameplay here. There is a certain idea there, certainly. Like, if there was a real embracing of the idea of the naturalist/nudist lifestyle to the point where you wanted to make a video game that represented the way you enjoy the beach, and you made a video game that was good with its gameplay mechanics as far as like playing volleyball and the other activities that you might do on a beach or in a nudist commune or naturalist commune. At a certain point, there might be an argument for a game like that, but it's such a niche audience, it would definitely make a lot more sense to put some clothes on them just so you can sell it to more people. Like, if anything, I would imagine there's an argument for making a like volleyball game that then had extra DLC to remove the clothing and become nudist, and there were mods definitely that do that for some of the volleyball games. But yeah, the idea of promoting or growing the naturalist nudist movement, I think, has pretty much died out because it's just a niche group of people that want to do that, and they are mostly allowed to do it in their own little segregated nudist beaches. But yeah, it's definitely not become the standard or the norm in all beaches. Like, I probably would take entire generations just to get people to embrace like the free to nipple movement and topless beaches, like Europe has. Eventually we may get to that point, but the United States in particular is rather puritanical and would not really appreciate that. Moving on, we have a game here called Void Grim, which looks like it's a card-based game. It visually is blinding neon. I don't think there's anything here that interests me. English only.
You did good.
We have Super Powers Old Maid 3 Days, which seems like a blinding neon old maid game too. Old Maid is kind of a simplistic card game, so you don't see it a lot. This is online PvP only, English, Japanese, Chinese. Let's say no to that. We have something called Arcante Definitive Edition, which maybe there's a game that has some history or relevancy here, but from the outside looking in and not knowing that history, this really just looks like it's a kind of low effort asset flip. This developer did release Arcante in October of 2020, so he's re-releasing the game as a definitive edition a year later. That seems like not like a lot of effort has been put into it to remaster it. Lemon vs. Teddy looks like nothing of interest. English and Polish, free game. Bird Pro Skater. Looks like an infinite runner of no real interest. So we can say no to that. Egg King. Looks like a generic physics game / platformer. Nothing grabbing my attention there. Way too expensive at $4.99. Block Heist Robbery Simulator. Looks like a low polygon asset flip. Says it supports several languages for $4.49. Still a no to me. Murder by Moonlight 2 is just a match 3 puzzle game of no interest. So no for that. I think we had already probably talked about the season 2 of Sam & Max being re-released by Skunk Ape Games. There seems to be no real controversy of censorship in the second season that anybody paid attention to, but I imagine very few people who would have known about the censorship in the first game stayed around for the second game. It would just be kind of ridiculous. So yeah, I'm also in a weird position where I really could never justify owning these remastered versions of the game when I already own the original versions of the game. Like, I definitely don't want to get into the position of starting to buy the same games multiple times. I have far too many new games I want to buy and games I haven't played. Kiteboarding Pro. You don't see a lot of games about kiteboarding. In fact, this may be the first one I've ever seen in my life. So I kind of want to say yes to this and put it on the follow list. Third-party EULA, several languages, $11.99. We'll give it a follow. Here we have a game called Wind and Leaves that looks like it's a VR game. And it looks a lot like Breath of the Wild. I'm gonna give this a follow. Although, in fairness, I can't really tell what is supposed to be happening here. This video trailer's not really showing me what you're supposed to be doing. Climbing trees, grabbing fruits, planting things, growing trees. Yeah. Feels like some very weird actions happening for a VR game in that case. We have a Big Fish Games hidden object game, which we pretty much always dismiss those. $12.59, staying fairly consistent as far as their prizes. The City Must Grow is obviously a city simulator of no real interest, so we can say no to that. English and Turkish languages. And then a game called Looking for Aliens, which looks like it's just a hidden object game, maybe an even cell phone port. Doesn't even really feel like you're doing a hidden object game. Yeah, what is the actual gameplay mechanic here? People are walking around. Oh, no, it is definitely a hidden object game. Interesting. Alright, well, let's get our daily reward, and that's about all we are going to get today as far as Shadowverse is concerned. And it's not even really worth my effort to try and get like quick disconnects or victories off screen, unless I am just straight up not playing. If I had some kind of like automated script running that's just clicking on buttons and ending the turn and starting new games, maybe I could cheat my way into something like that, but yeah, otherwise it's just not even worth the effort to try and get quick disconnects to win here. Alright, so Let's see what has come out on Steam in the last 3 hours and 40 minutes. If there's anything there worth mentioning. Generally, there isn't. Oh, and there was only like 4 or 5 games that came out. Good. That makes that fairly easy. So we will cover those on Wednesday. See if GameDeveloper.com's Twitter feed has anything new. Well, yes, the Ubisoft Chief Studios officer has departed after 16 months. And then, is there anything else new from GameDeveloper.com? No. Good. So, a couple pages, a couple news stories to talk about there. Then, Komatsu. Yeah, even if I start just at like an hour later than normal, there tends not to be any new news. And see, we had that huge list of games that came out over the weekend, and yet nothing came out on a Monday. Like that's not because people chose to not list their games on a Monday. It's way more logical to want to list your game on Monday than a Saturday or a Sunday. That's because Valve is and Steam is manipulating the release dates. Alright, so now I'm just going down my main Twitter feed just to see if there's any unique news. There's going to be a PlayStation Blog Awards, which Psychonauts 2 is up for Best Soundtrack. So, yeah. Suppose there is going to be more awards things, and even with the Steam Winter Sale, those nominations will come about. Yeah, as far as the Twitter in general, there might be at some point a good competitor that comes out to Twitter, but I have yet to hear anybody announce anything that really feels like it would be the new thing. That being said, there have been several platforms that have been released specifically for rich and famous people, and I think what we might see is a case of you might see a Twitter for famous people that then nobody else can even join or read, and celebrities generally just have decided it's not worth their effort to talk to the general public, or even companies may have decided that it's not worth their effort to talk to the general public. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you started to see video game companies and companies in general just going quiet, not responding to support requests or anything like that, like, and just ghosting people. Moving on though, IGN says a Mega Man movie is in the works at Netflix. A live action Mega Man movie, which, okay, that'd be interesting. Warzone and Vanguard holiday events have been confirmed with free multiplayer trailer, according to Video Games Chronicles.com. Gamatsu says Phantom Breaker Omnia launches March 15th, 2022. And then GameDeveloper.com has a Q&A catching up with the protesters outside the Game Awards. This is actually the first I've even heard of protesters being outside of the Game Awards, which, yeah, despite the fact that the Game Awards very much started with the idea of supporting some of the protesting actions, seems like very few people, seems like that story did not get reported as much as it should have been. Although in all fairness, if you look at this picture, seems like there's three signs here and only 2 people. Two women, I would assume. I'm not sure if this is just a tan white woman looking at her foot, or if she's not white, but there's hardly the numbers we saw in some of the Activision Blizzard protests, where you had entire walkouts, hundreds of people, maybe even approaching 1,000 people, which is big numbers for protests, certainly. Anyways, GameDeveloper.com says Ubisoft's Chief Studios Officers departs after 16 months. Virginie Haas? I don't know how you'd pronounce that first name. I don't even know if it's a guy or girl. It's a girl. In pursuit of other activities. Anytime they don't have an announcement, I always question it, but in fairness, a lot of times they don't have an announcement because of some kind of like non-compete clause or something, and you do find some of these middle managers and upper managers do tend to already have a job lined up, or a better offer in some other field. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. I guess I could also throw out there that at least so far I updated the firmware on my router, and I may very well have finally fixed it, but I've said that 3 or 4 times and found it not to be true as far as the Wi-Fi problems. But yeah, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.